Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining today's program. At the very outset, let us welcome you and wish you a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. And Swami Medhanandaji, who is who is in Mysuru, who is now senior research fellow in philosophy in Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Moral and Spiritual Education, RIMSE, Mysuru, Karnataka, is here. He had kindly spoken to us earlier also, and we are so inspired by his talk. And today he will speak on a very important topic, that is Sri Ramakrishna, Christianity, and the spiritual power of music. And tomorrow also is a very important day, that is the Tithi Puja of Holy Mother Sarada Devi, and Swami Pitambarananda, very senior monk of the order, will speak on will speak to us on mother. That is exact topic is real nature of Holy Mother Sarada Devi. At the outset, once again, please accept our warm Christmas greetings. We intensely pray for the happiness, peace, and prosperity of all of you and your families. Let the Christmas bring back happiness and peace to all of you. We hope that with the better internalization of the teachings and blessings of the Christ, and inspired and energized with the understanding of practical Vedanta, our life will become better and better, all of us progressing significantly in our spiritual journey. Let us pray and hope that the curse of the pandemic is soon behind us and the new year brings becomes new hope, happiness, and confidence in all of us. We are also distressed by the huge human and material sufferings and devastations unleashed by the super typhoon Rai that tore through southern and central Philippines late last week. We wholeheartedly pray for the peace of the departed souls who lost their lives in the tragedy. We deeply empathize with the people who suffered physical as well as material loss. We pray to the Lord for His mercy and blessings with the ardent hope that soon normalcy comes back to the suffering people with the return of cheers and smiles in all the faces. Once again, we wish you and your families and friends a Merry Christmas and a very happy and wonderful New Year once again. Now, we would request our Filipino representative and friend, Ms. Jana, Attorney Jana, to speak a few words to introduce the topic to our Filipino audience so that they can better internalize and understand Swami Medhanandaji's talk. Ms. Jana.
Yes, thank you Sir Nirmal. Magandang hapon po sa lahat ng sumusubaybay dito sa ating Vedanta sa ating talk today na hatid po sa atin ng Ramakrishna Vedanta Society Philippines. We are very fortunate to have with us today Swami Medhananda to speak about Ramakrishna, Christianity, and the spiritual power of music. And I would like to first greet everyone a very Merry Christmas, maligayang Pasko po sa lahat. And also, thank you, Sir Nirmal, for the invocation and that we all hope that all those who are affected by the typhoons and all the calamities here in the Philippines will soon rise above the challenges and that we find the spirit of Christmas still within their hearts, as the song says. And So now I turn over to Father Swami Medhanandaji. Thank you.
Swami Udharanandaji, kindly speak a few words. Our guide and minister in charge, Swami Udharanandaji Maharaj.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ganguly. Thank you very much, Jana. I, on behalf of the Ramakrishna Vedanta Society of the Philippines, welcome you all. A very good evening to you also, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year in advance. I'm happy that today we are celebrating Christmas in one way because and it's still the pandemic fear and that war is still on. But in spite of all those limitations, we are able to continue these classes and celebrate. Though our heart goes for those who have suffered due to we are already suffering from pandemic, and to add it on, there was a typhoon in southern part of Manila because of which many people have lost their lives, and devastating loss is devastating. It cannot be described in words. So we pray for their welfare, and we are praying. This is also this whole attempt is also to a prayer dedicated to them, so that they may get peace and some consolation and some strength to fight the adversity that they are facing going through now. So with these words, I'm very grateful to Medhanandi for second time accepting our request to speak. We are really very grateful to you, Maharaj, for kindly accepting. And I'm sure the topic that you have chosen, there will be many takeaways for our brothers and sisters here in Philippines, because as you know, Philippines is a musically oriented country. Everybody can sing, here every third house there is a guitar and they play music. So it is a musically oriented country and they love music. So I am sure that today's topic they will really enjoy. So with the prayer that the true spirit of Christmas shine in your heart and light your path, I'm praying for you all. I request without much ado, Swami Medhanandaji to please take over the talk. Thank you very much, Maharaj, once again. Thank you very much.
Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine avatar varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. I offer my humble pranams to revered Swami Udharanandaji Maharaj for kindly inviting me to speak to you all today, and also my thanks to Nirmal Babu and Miss Janna for your kind introductions. As Nirmal mentioned, I'll be speaking today on Sri Ramakrishna, Christianity, and the spiritual power of music. I've been told that Swami Sarvapriyanji gave a lecture several weeks ago. I looked at parts of the lecture actually, and that he focused primarily on Jesus' Sermon on the Mount from a Vedantic standpoint. So I'm going to try to avoid overlapping with his own lecture. I might mention the Sermon on the Mount briefly, but I'll focus on some other aspects of Christ's life and teachings. As all of you know, of course, this is a very auspicious and holy day, the birth of an avatara, Jesus Christ. And Jesus has a very important role in the Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition, and many of you probably know why, but I just wanted to mention a few of the details, a few of the connections between Sri Ramakrishna and Jesus, and then we can go on to discuss some other aspects of Christianity in relation to Vedanta. So first of all, Sri Ramakrishna himself owned a copy of the Holy Bible. He couldn't read, but he would frequently ask people to read out from the Bible, and he would listen very carefully, and he loved the teachings of Jesus Christ especially. And in 1874, during the sadhana period, he suddenly felt this intense desire to practice the Christian religion. And for a few days, he completely forgot about his Hindu practices. He stopped visiting the Kali Mandir in Dakshineshwar. And instead, he was just immersed in the thought of Jesus. And most of you will know this, but he had a remarkable spiritual experience in the Panchavati, the garden area of Dakshineshwar, where he had a vision of Jesus Christ merging into his own body. And he heard a voice coming from his own heart telling him that Jesus died for the sins of humankind and to redeem mankind. And it was after that transformative spiritual experience that Sri Ramakrishna fully embraced Jesus as an incarnation of God. And he kept a picture of Jesus in his own bedroom, which he worshipped daily along with other deities. So for all these reasons, Jesus Christ and Christianity play a very, very important role in the Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition. But I also wanted to mention a less widely known incident that's recorded in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. In the Bangla, the book is called the Sri Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita. This incident took place on October 31st, 1885. A Christian Quaker monk named Mishra, he came to visit Sri Ramakrishna. And he was a very interesting person. He was wearing ordinary clothes, but underneath his clothes, he was wearing gerua, like this type of gerua, the clothes of a sannyasi. So he's a Christian monk who came to visit Sri Ramakrishna. And why did he come to Sri Ramakrishna? It's very interesting. And he tells, I'm going to quote directly from this incident. This is what Mishra tells Sri Ramakrishna. He says, Jesus is not the son of Mary. He is God himself. Then he's speaking to the devotees. Now he, pointing to Sri Ramakrishna, is as you see him. Again, he is God himself. You are not able to recognize him. I have seen him before in visions, though I see him now directly with my eyes. I saw a garden where he was seated on a raised seat. Another person was seated on the ground, but he was not so far advanced. So this is quite remarkable. A Christian monk had a vision of Sri Ramakrishna without having met him or known anything about him before, and recognized that he was an avatar, an incarnation of God, even though his own Ishtadevata was Christ. So in a sense, we can say that Mishra actually had a spiritual realization that Sri Ramakrishna himself was none other than Jesus Christ. And in the course of that conversation, Sri Ramakrishna went into a high state of samadhi. And then this is recorded by Mahananda Gupta, again in the Gospel. Regaining partial consciousness, Sri Ramakrishna fixed his gaze on Mishra and began to laugh. Still in an ecstatic mood, he shook hands with him and laughed again. Taking him by the hands, he said, "You will get what you are seeking." So clearly here Sri Ramakrishna is manifested as Mishra's own Ishtadevata, as Jesus Christ, and gave him his blessings and said that your life will be fulfilled. Whatever you're looking for in this life, your spiritual goals will be fulfilled. So this is another incident that I think is much less well known, but it's a very important incident understanding the role that Jesus Christ and Christianity play in our tradition. I also wanted to mention, before going on to the main topic of my talk, which is the spiritual power of music, I wanted to discuss some of the deep similarities in the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna on the one hand and Jesus Christ on the other. One thing you'll find is that just as Jesus spoke in a very simple, colloquial language so that everybody could understand him, and that he frequently used parables, stories, metaphors to explain very high spiritual teachings, Sri Ramakrishna did exactly the same thing in his local Bengali language. He wouldn't, he wouldn't give philosophical teachings very frequently. He would explain very lofty spiritual ideas using metaphors, using analogies, using simple stories involving events that happen in a typical village, for instance, during his time. So that's one very interesting and important similarity between the way that Jesus and Sri Ramakrishna taught spiritual ideas and points about sadhana. And also on certain important points, they have given very similar teachings. So I wanted to mention a few of them. This is one teaching of Christ. He says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon. Mammon is an old English term which just means worldliness. We can think of it as worldliness. And Sri Ramakrishna would say very similar things. He said, for instance, this is taken from the Gospel. He says, Sri Ramakrishna says, one cannot see God unless Maya steps aside from the door. Rama, Lakshmana, and Sita were walking together. Rama was in front, Sita walked in the middle, and Lakshmana followed them. But Lakshmana could not see Rama because Sita was between them. In like manner, man cannot see God because Maya is between them. So, just as Jesus taught that you cannot have both God and worldliness at the same time, you have to choose one path, either the path of spiritual life or the path of worldly life, but you cannot mix the two. Sri Ramakrishna said exactly the same thing. You cannot mix bhoga and yoga. They're two opposite paths. So that in order to realize God, you have to completely renounce Maya, which he explains in a more concrete language as kama kanchana, as lust and greed. These are the two twin, we can say the twin pillars of the ego. Once you renounce those, the ego can be much more easily destroyed. And this should also, Jesus' teaching and Sri Ramakrishna's teaching, this should also remind us, if any of you are familiar with the Upanishads, a famous mantra from the Katha Upanishad, about Shreya and Preya. Shreyascha Preyascha Manushyame Tastav Sampaditya Vivinakti Dhira. Shreyo Hidiro Vipreyaso Vranite Preyo Mando Yogakshema Vranite. It's a very beautiful mantra. One of Swami Vivekananda's favorite mantras from the Upanishad. And Swami Vivekananda gives a very nice translation of the two main words, Shreya and Preya. He says that Shreya is the path of perfection, of spiritual perfection. And Preya is the path of enjoyment, sense enjoyment. And so this mantra from the Katha Upanishad is saying that there are two paths, the path of perfection and the path of enjoyment, that confront each one of us. And each one of us, as human beings, has to make a choice. We have to choose whether to go on the path of perfection or the path of enjoyment. But once we make the choice, we cannot then try to mix the two paths. We cannot do both at the same time. If we choose the path of perfection, we have to give up enjoyments. If we choose the path of enjoyment, we have to give up any kind of spiritual goals in our life. That's the main teaching. That you find that in the Upanishads, Vedantic scriptures, you find it in the teachings of Jesus, and you find it in the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. Another important theme that you'll find mentioned again and again in the teachings of Jesus and also in the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna is prayer. And they didn't just encourage their devotees to pray, they taught devotees, visitors, how to pray, the best way to pray. This is what Jesus says about how we should pray. Jesus says, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him." So it's a very beautiful teaching. Jesus is saying that when we pray, we shouldn't do so in a manner that attracts the attention of others. Because the moment we engage in prayer in order to be seen by others, again the ego will creep in. And the prayer becomes counterproductive, right? The whole aim of sadhana should be to eliminate ego. The moment we start doing prayer and other sadhanas to impress others, we become more egoistic. We start becoming interested in, I hope that others praise me for how much I'm praying, for how holy I am, for how pious I am. So it's a very dangerous game that we play. So it's always better to do your spiritual practices in solitude, where nobody else even knows that you're there, nobody knows what you're doing. Sri Ramakrishna, if you've studied the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna said some very similar things. In a number of places, Sri Ramakrishna distinguishes between two types of devotee, two types of bhakta. He says there's a sattvika bhakta and a rajasika bhakta. So he's using terms taken from the Sankhya philosophy of the three gunas. Three gunas are sattva, rajas, and tamas. And he's distinguishing these two types of devotees as follows. He says, bhakti, devotion, has its sattva. A devotee who possesses it meditates on God in absolute secret, perhaps inside his mosquito net. In India, there's so many mosquitoes, so that's why he's referring to a mosquito net. Others think he is asleep. Since he is late in getting up, they think perhaps he has not slept well during the night. An aspirant possessed of Rajasika Bhakti puts a tilak on his forehead and a necklace of holy rudraksha beads, interspersed with gold ones around his neck. At worship, he wears a silk cloth. So this is a very nice, very concrete way that Sri Ramakrishna contrasts the Rajasika spiritual aspirant from the Sattvika spiritual aspirant. Notice how similar his teachings are with the teachings of Jesus. Sri Ramakrishna says that people who are more Rajasic in nature, they'll perform spiritual practices, they'll do their prayers, but they'll do it in such a way to attract the attention of other people. They'll wear very gaudy clothing and japa malas with, so that other people will see how holy they are. And whereas he says that the Sattvika Bhakta is somebody who does their sadhanas in the dead of night where nobody knows. Other people think that the person is sleeping, in fact. They might wake up late. Other people might say, oh, he's a lazy fellow, he's not doing anything, he's worthless. And that Sattvika Bhakta won't say one word. He won't mention to anybody about his or her own spiritual practices. Another thing that Jesus taught, he said this is taken from the book of Matthew, verse 22. Jesus says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. This is probably the most important teaching of Jesus. Your most important goal in life is to love God with all your heart and mind. And Sri Ramakrishna says exactly the same thing. This is a quotation from the Gospel from dated 11th March 1882. Sri Ramakrishna says, the goal of human life is to love God. Bhakti, devotion, is the one essential thing. And he says in another place, from an entry in February 1882, also from the Gospel, he says, Sri Ramakrishna says, the point is to love God even as the mother loves her child, the chaste wife her husband, and the worldly man his wealth. Add together these three forces of love, these three powers of attraction, and give it all to God. Then you will certainly see him. So you see how beautifully the teachings of Jesus and Sri Ramakrishna gel together. Another thing that Jesus emphasized again and again is the need to have longing for God. How do we realize God? We have to pant for God. Just as we pant if we're thrown into a large body of water and we can't swim, what happens? We pant for our breath. We should pant for God in the way that we pant for our breath. So one of Jesus' most famous teachings from the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. What does Jesus mean by knocking on the door of God? This is not just some kind of intellectual investigation. Does God exist? Does God not exist? Not like that. It should be a spiritual searching with your whole soul, with your heart and your mind combined. This is what Sri Ramakrishna calls vyakulata. The Bangla term is vyakulata. That comes from the Sanskrit term vyakulata, which means an intense longing for God. Sri Ramakrishna would often emphasize this. He said, cry to the Lord with an intensely yearning heart, and you will certainly see him. People shed a whole jug of tears for wife and children. They swim in tears for money. But who weeps for God? Cry to him with a real cry. And notice that at the end of the statement, he says, cry to God with a real cry. If you study the gospel, you'll find that on almost every page, Sri Ramakrishna says, how should you pray? You should pray with tears in your eyes. And he really means it. This is not a metaphor. Why does he emphasize tears? Because tears are a sign of sincerity. They're a mark that you really, that feeling, that you're not just saying something to God, but that you're really feeling it from within. He says it again and again. In another place, Sri Ramakrishna says, you must also pray to God with tears in your eyes for knowledge and devotion. The idea is that through prayer, through our spiritual practices, and when we do it sincerely, naturally tears will come from our eyes. And that through those tears and through that spiritual practice, we purify our minds and hearts. Sri Ramakrishna says exactly this. He says, the dirt of the mind can be washed away with the tears of prayer. It's a very beautiful metaphor. The dirt of the mind can be washed away with the tears of prayer. Keep this in mind, because when we get to music, we'll find why, again, it's so important that we should pray not just verbally, but with our hearts. And another interesting parallel between the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna is that Jesus himself, even though he was God himself, he gave what is now called the Lord's Prayer. He gave an example of the correct way to pray to God. So this is very famous, but I'll read it anyway, and then I'll discuss Sri Ramakrishna. So Jesus says, "This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one." So keep this in mind. Notice that there are especially two elements in the Lord's Prayer that Jesus taught. Number one, when we pray to God, we shouldn't pray for worldly things. Please make my son better, or please, give me more money, or please take me to heaven after I die. No, these are all worldly prayers. The highest prayer is to pray, "Thy will be done." This is a very important teaching, and one that Swami Vivekananda also often emphasized. Secondly, notice that at the end of the Lord's Prayer, Jesus says, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from Satan, from the evil one." Jesus says you should pray directly to God to protect you from temptation. And now, look at what Sri Ramakrishna says. Sri Ramakrishna himself, in the Gospel, he also teaches devotees how to pray and what to pray for. So I'm reading this from an incident that took place, a conversation that took place on March 11th, 1885, from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. The devotees seated in the room looked at Sri Ramakrishna as he began to chant the sweet name of the Divine Mother. After the chanting, he began to pray. Then Mohanana Gupta himself, he reflects on this. He says, what was the need of prayer to a soul in constant communion with God? Did he not rather want to teach erring mortals how to pray? So Mohanana Gupta immediately understood that he's praying to Mother to set an example for others. So then he says, addressing the Divine Mother, Sri Ramakrishna said, "O Mother, I throw myself on thy mercy. I take shelter at thy hallowed feet. I do not want bodily comforts. I do not crave name and fame. I do not seek the 8 occult powers, the Ashtasiddhi. Be gracious and grant that I may have pure love for thee, a love unsmitten by worldly desire, untainted by any selfish ends, a love craved by the devotee for the sake of love alone." The Bangla here is Shuddha Bhakti, pure bhakti for God. "And grant me the favor, O Mother, that I may not be deluded by thy world-bewitching Maya, that I may never be attached to the world, to lust and greed, conjured up by thy inscrutable Maya." So just as Jesus taught that we should only pray to God that his will be done, Sri Ramakrishna says, don't pray to God for any kind of worldly things. He says, I don't want anything in this world. I don't want bodily pleasures. I don't want even name and fame. I don't want even the higher so-called spiritual powers, the siddhis, the ashtasiddhi, the 8 powers. I want only love for you, O Lord. And then Sri Ramakrishna adds, and Divine Mother, please don't delude me with your world-bewitching Maya. In Bangla, the original Bangla is, Tomar bhubono mohine mayai amake mukto korona. Just as Jesus taught that we should pray to God not to lead us into temptation, not to be deluded by Satan. So you see how wonderfully parallel the teachings of 2 great avatars are, the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. Now, what does all of this have to do with music? That's what I want to get to now. And for the remainder of the lecture, I want to discuss the third part of the title of my lecture. So I've discussed Sri Ramakrishna, I've discussed Christianity. Now I want to discuss the spiritual power of music. So the way I can try to make this segue into music and the spiritual power of music is to start with the problem. Okay, so these great avatars, Jesus, Sri Ramakrishna, many other avatars like Chaitanya, they taught us to pray, that prayer is a very powerful spiritual practice. We know, we've studied their teachings, we've read their teachings, and we know that we should pray. And many of us have a daily practice of prayer, right? But the problem is sometimes what happens, very frequently actually, our prayers become mechanical. They don't come from the heart. We're just verbally praying. We're verbally speaking to God in some way. But that prayer is only somehow intellectual or only verbal, but it doesn't come from the heart. And this is where music comes in. If you look at the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you'll find that almost on every page, it's an over 1,000 page book, on almost every page, Sri Ramakrishna is either singing some devotional song or listening to a beautiful devotional song, usually by Ram Prasad or some other great singers, composers. Why is music, why did Sri Ramakrishna value music so highly? And I think the reason is because the moment we listen to a song or sing a song with bhava, bhava is a Sanskrit word and bhav is the Bangla word. Bhava means with genuine feeling, with genuine devotion. So when we listen to a song with genuine devotion, a devotional song, or when we sing a song ourselves with bhava, automatically what happens is we cultivate a longing for God. We develop this, we get a taste of the kind of vyakulata, the kind of longing that we need in order to realize God. It's a way of making our prayers heartfelt and sincere. So I wanted to give you two examples of how listening to music can make our spiritual closer to God. And one thing that's very important to keep in mind is, as far as I'm aware, all of the different theistic religions, so whether we're talking about Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Hinduism, what you'll find is most of the devotional songs, or many of them, are in the form of prayers to God. The songs themselves are prayers. And so by listening with concentration and with sincerity to those songs, we are, in a sense, we become identified with the singer. So that's the kind of theory behind music. How do we explain the spiritual power of music? The idea is this, that singer is praying to God with genuine feeling. And when we listen with concentration to that song, what happens is that we momentarily identify, we merge our identity with the identity of the singer, so that we share the feeling of the singer for those moments. So if the singer is praying to God with true bhava, with true feeling and with true longing, we momentarily feel and we share in that singer's vyakulata, that singer's longing, and that singer's devotion for God. So I wanted to give you two examples of this, one from a Hindu tradition and one from a Christian tradition. So I wanted to start with a song from Ram Prasad, one of Sri Ramakrishna's favorite composers. Can you see the PowerPoint? Nirmal Babu?
Yes, Maharaj. Yes, Maharaj.
Very good. So thank you. So who was Ram Prasad? Ram Prasad, he was born roughly in 1723 and he passed away in 1775. So he was born over 100 years before Sri Ramakrishna. And in Leela Prasanga, Swami Sharadanandaji. So Leela Prasanga is the biography of Sri Ramakrishna written by Swami Sharadanandaji. This is what Sharadanandaji wrote. He says, we were told by the master himself, by Sri Ramakrishna himself, that he regarded as an auxiliary to his daily worship the singing for the Divine Mother, the Devi, of the songs composed by perfected devotees like Ram Prasad. His mind was filled with zeal when he sang those songs, with his heart full of profound spiritual emotion. Sri Ramakrishna thought, bhaktas like Ram Prasad had mother's vision, so it is certain that the mother of the universe is realizable. Why can I not then be blessed with her vision? Sri Ramakrishna used to say with an eager heart, "Thou showed thyself to Ramprasad, mother. Why then shouldest thou not reveal thyself to me? I don't want wealth, friends, relatives, enjoyment of pleasure, and so on. Do show thyself to me." Sri Ramakrishna would pray and cry this way, while his bosom was flooded with streams of tears from his eyes, and the heaviness of his heart lessened a little. So this is a very clear example of how Sri Ramakrishna incorporated music into his own spiritual sadhana. He daily sang the songs of Ramprasad with great feeling. And because he knew that Ramprasad himself realized God through singing, through calling on Mother with heartfelt feeling. And he said, "Oh Mother, I'm singing now the songs of a realized soul, the songs of Ramprasad. Please show yourself to me. Why are you not revealing yourself to me?" So to give you an example of this, I wanted to share with you a beautiful song of Ramprasad's. Of course, it's originally in Bangla. And what I'll do is I'll first read the Bangla, because I think some of you at least are Bengali, you can read Bengali, of course. Side. And once we understand the meaning, the spiritual meaning of the song, then I'll play the song for you, and I want you to listen carefully. So, Ami mama bole ar dakbo na. O ma diyecho ditecho kotoi jontrona. ছিলেন গৃহবাসী করিলি সন্ন্যাসী আর কি ক্ষমতা রাখো এলোকেশী ঘরে ঘরে যাব ভিক্ষা মেগে খাবো মা বলে আর কোলে যাব না ডাকি বারে বারে মা মা বলিয়ে মা কি রয়েছে চক্ষুকর্ণ খেয়ে মা বিদ্যমান এই দুঃখ সন্তানে মা মনে কি আর ছেলে বাঁচেন না। So it's very hard to translate Bengali lyrics into English, but this is a rough translation. I will no longer call on you, O Mother. Mother, so he's referring to Divine Mother Kali. Mother, you have put me through so much suffering. Though I was a householder, you made me a sannyasin, an all-renouncing monk. Who knows what else you are capable of, Mother? I will go from home to home living on alms, begging for food. I won't come to your lap anymore, calling Mother. I repeatedly call Mother, Mother, but in spite of seeing and hearing me, you continue to ignore me. That you, O Mother, are present is your child's sorrow. When a mother dies, does her son not live? So if we were to characterize the main feeling of this song, we can say in Bangla, there's a perfect Bangla word which is very difficult to translate into English. The word is obiman. In this song, Ramprasad is like a child calling on his mother, and he has this. In Bangla we say obiman korche. Obiman kora, it's very difficult to translate, but it means basically it's like a child complaining to his mother. He wants something from mother and his mother is not giving it to him. So this is the whole feeling of the song is based on obiman kora. It means, what does this child want? This child wants nothing but mother to come to him. And he's calling on mother and mother is not listening. So this is the beauty of this song. This is the feeling behind the song. The whole song it expresses directly and very emotionally the feeling of longing for the divine, longing for the Divine Mother. So when we listen carefully with concentration to the song, which I want you to do, just in a few moments I'll be playing the song to you. So when you listen to the song, follow the lyrics of the song. Listen very carefully to what the singer is saying. He's a very talented musician, Dhananjay Bhattacharya. There are two brothers, Pannalal Bhattacharya and Dhananjay Bhattacharya. They're two great singers. And one of the things I like most about both of them, both Pannalal Bhattacharya and Dhananjay Bhattacharya, is that their singing is completely free of any kind of tricks, any kind of gimmicks. They don't add any extra flourishes. It's very simple singing, but with a very pure emotion, what we would call bhava. They sing with simplicity and beauty and with bhava. And I think you'll find that when you listen to this song. And listen carefully to the lyrics. And as you listen, if you listen with concentration, what you'll find is that the longing expressed by Ramprasad becomes your own longing. And you get a glimpse of what it means to really long for God.
ওনার কাছে প্লে করছে, আমার কাছে প্লে করছে না।
আমাদের শুনতে পাচ্ছে না।
Is the song playing? Shall I? I think at least I'm
Oh, is it not?
not
It's
playing. Not
Is that
playing.
right?
Shall I try?
Oh,
I
yeah,
have ready
please,
with me.
Sorry, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay,
I
no,
thought
it's
it was playing. Yeah,
it's
go ahead.
okay.
Thank you. You can please stop the song.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nirmala. So
Welcome.
thank you. The audio quality is not great, but I hope you got a sense of the beauty of the song. And if you want to listen to it separately, you can. That's why I gave the YouTube link at the bottom. You can just find it and listen to yourself with headphones. But I hope you can see that the way that the song is sung in the bhava, the feeling behind the song, the keynote is longing for God. Just as a child longs for his mother who's absent, the singer is calling on mother, and you can. One of the nice things about the way that Dhananjay Bhattacharya sang this song is Even the way he says the word ma is, it's so full of feeling. That vyakulata that Sri Ramakrishna talks about, that Jesus talks about, knock and the door shall be open. How should we knock on the door of God? This song really expresses that very beautifully. So if you listen to it carefully, and songs like this, they're on almost every page of Kathamrita, then listening to music itself becomes the highest kind of spiritual practice. Now, moving to the Christian tradition, I wanted to give an example of a lesser known Western classical composer and musician. I bet that most of you have not even heard of him. His name is Dietrich Buxtehude, who was born in 1637 and passed away in 1707. He was born in Denmark. He's a Danish composer and musician of what's called the Baroque period of Western classical music. So the Baroque period was roughly from 1600 to 1750, and it includes some very famous classical musicians like Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, whom I'm sure many of you have heard of. Vivaldi is another famous Baroque composer and musician. Handel is another one. So he is a lesser known one. In fact, Buxtehude, though, he was one of Bach's teachers, and Bach walked a huge distance in order to listen to him and to learn from him. So he was also a great composer in his own right, but he's lesser known by today's standards. And Buxtehude, he composed a lot of Christian church music, because at that time when you composed music, it was usually for the church. And my favorite song of his is, it's what's called a motet, M-O-T-E-T, which is the word for a sacred choral work. Choral work means there's a singer singing a song, and that song is put to music with violins and piano and other instruments. Not piano, but different instruments. And what Buxtehude did with his great musical genius was he took a prayer from a part of the Old Testament, which is the first part of the Bible. There's a section of the Old Testament called the Psalms, P-A-S-A-L-M. These Psalms are a collection of 150 devotional poems, which are actually meant to be sung. And so he takes one of these very beautiful prayers. So the prayers in the Holy Bible, in the Old Testament, prayers addressed to God. And he puts it to music in a very beautiful way. One particular psalm, the verses 73, 25 to 26. And these are the words. Now, he composed his songs in German, so he's using the German translation of the original Hebrew language from the Old Testament. And I assume most of you don't know German, so I gave the German on the left side, and I've given a translation on the right side. So first, I'll just read the German, and then I'll explain the translation, and then we'll listen to the song. Herr, wenn ich nur dich habe, so frage ich nichts nach Himmel und Erden. Wenn mir gleich Leib und Seele verschmacht, so bist du doch Gott alle Zeit. Meines Herzens Trost, so bist du doch Gott alle Zeit. Meines Herzens Trost und mein Teil. It's a very beautiful feeling. This is the English translation. O Lord, if I have you, I desire nothing in heaven or on earth. Even if my flesh and soul are troubled, you, O God, remain always the consolation of my heart. You, O God, remain always my heart's consolation. You are mine forever. So remember that with Ram Prasad's song, I explained that the dominant feeling behind that song was longing for God. And if you ask, what is the dominant feeling behind this song, behind this beautiful prayer from the Bible, I think we can say that it's love for God and a feeling of surrender to God, right? That I have nothing in the world, I don't care for anything in this world but you, O God. And as long as I have you, I'm perfectly happy in this world. So keep that in mind as you listen to the song, and try to identify with the feeling of the poet of this song. So Nirmal Babu, can you please play the song?
Sure, Maharaj.
Thank you. This is about 5 minutes, but please listen carefully. Nirma Babu, the song is that's very poor quality. Okay, thank you, Nirmal Babu. So I apologize for the very poor playback quality. Nirmal Babu and I, yesterday, we met and we tried to figure out a way to play back the music so that it would be good audio quality, but this is extremely poor, unfortunately. So if you like the song, I strongly recommend that you go to this YouTube link that I've given at the bottom of the screen. This doesn't give a taste of the actual song because you couldn't hear the music properly. So I'm sorry about that. This is a kind of a technical glitch on our end. In any case, I hope the overall point still stands that listening to music, that singing songs, but privately, not for others, but privately, just as Jesus taught and that Sri Ramakrishna taught, when we call on God through song, it can be the highest spiritual practice if we do it in the right spirit, with genuine feeling and with genuine devotion. So on that note, let us pray to Sri Ramakrishna and to Jesus Christ that we grow day to day with each passing day in devotion and longing, and we learn how to pray with true sincerity and feeling, and that we can use music and listen to music and sing songs as a potent form of spiritual practice. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you very much, Maharaji, for your such insightful talk and especially explaining the power of music to reach nearer to the God, and also the similarity between the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and Jesus. You brought to us the most important points where Sri Ramakrishna and Jesus have really given the primacy of love for God and God realization. We will now invite questions. And very sorry for that music. I used the same link that you had kindly provided, but somehow there's some problem with that. It's not sounding so clear. So now you are most welcome to ask any question to Maharaj Ji on the topic, or any observation or any clarification that you need. Kindly introduce yourself, and you please unmute, and when you finish, please mute yourself. And for the...
Can I ask you?
Yes, sure.
Can I ask you a question?
Hiranya, please go ahead.
Maharaj, just one stand because of my ignorance. When you said in the first part of your lecture that Ramakrishna Dev also taught how to pray to Goddess Kali. So we Hindu devotees, when we go to Ramakrishna, pray to Ramakrishna, we know that there is someone else who is Goddess Kali. We should also pray to her, or Krishna, we should pray to us. Of course, for us, Ramakrishna Dev is also God, reincarnation, whatever you call it. But when Jesus Christ is teaching the devotees how to pray, who is he referring? But Christians don't go to the church and pray to someone else. They only pray to Jesus Christ. Who is the other character?
Yeah, right. So that's a good question. It has to do with Christian theology, but the basic idea is God the Father, basically. So there's the Holy Trinity in Christianity. There's God the Father, there's the Son of God, who's Jesus Christ, and then there's the Holy Spirit. So when people go to church and they pray to God, they'll pray to Jesus, but Jesus himself is the Son of God. And when Jesus is telling people back 2,000 years ago to pray, he's telling them to pray to God the Father, basically. It's the same God. Same God who has incarnated in human form as Jesus Christ. That's the idea. So when Christians pray to Jesus and when they pray to God the Father, they're praying to the same God in different forms.
But we don't do that. We have, for us, yes, we can theoretically argue that, but for us, there is a separate existence of Goddess Kali and separate existence of... Am I right or wrong? I don't know.
Well, so separate existence is complicated. Is she separate from Brahma? Probably not. Thakur Sri Ramakrishna never said they're separate. He said Brahma Shakti Abhed, which means they're the same God. When we pray to Kali, when we pray to Jesus, when we pray to Krishna, when we pray to Allah, we're all praying to the same God, appealing to us, manifesting to us in different forms. I think that would be more along the lines of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings.
Okay, Maharaj. Let others.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Miss Janna had a question.
Yes, please.
Yes, Miss Jana, Attorney
Yes.
Jana.
Yes, good evening, Maharaj. Actually, this is not a question. It is more of an insight also, and we are very thankful that you first introduced the parallelism between the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and Jesus, because I think I should also point out one more lesson, that Sri Ramakrishna mentioned that the ultimate goal of life is for God realization, and in the Bible, Jesus Christ likewise speaks of that the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven is within you. So that's just one major teaching that is very common between the two. And second, about the music itself, there's an old in the Old Testament there is a scripture from the First Samuel chapter 16 verses 14 until 23rd, where there's a man possessed by the evil spirit, and they called upon David because King David, when he was still not anointed a king, he was recognized to be a very excellent musician. He was very good at playing the lyre. So he was called upon to play the music, And behold, after he sung or after he played music, the evil spirit was driven away. So I think this is also relevant in the light of the spiritual power of music, because it has this therapeutic and healing power, so much so that a lot of people who are under distress, when they hear bhakti bhajans or religious music, they just totally forget about the troubles and the like. So
Thank you so
that's
much.
just
This is a
an insight,
wonderful
Swami.
point. So regarding the first point, the reason why I didn't talk about that, and your first point is very nice. You said that another important similarity between the teachings of Jesus and Sri Ramakrishna is that they both taught that the goal of life is God realization. I assume that Sarvapriyananda had talked about it. Maybe he didn't, but because I haven't watched his own lecture. But one of the main teachings of Jesus is that's along these lines is, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And in fact, the early Christian desert fathers, have you studied the book Philokalia? Are any of you familiar with that? Philokalia is a beautiful collection of the teachings of the Christian desert fathers. This was a few centuries after the death of Jesus. And they were hardcore ascetic monks. And they did great austerities living in the desert. And they realized God. And they gave all these wonderful teachings. And they strongly emphasized this teaching of Jesus's. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The book is called Philokalia, Philokalia. And it's available. It's a multi-volume, maybe 3 or 4 volumes. It's translated in English, originally in Greek, I believe. And one thing that's happened, I find, in the history of Christianity is that many Christians have watered down the teachings of Jesus, the original teachings of the Sermon on the Mount, because Jesus' teachings are pitched very high, very, very high. You have one with lust in your heart, you have already committed adultery. How many people in the world can really say that they're observing this teaching? That's just one example. But each one of the teachings is pitched so high. And what happened, I think, in the history of Christianity is that Martin Luther, who's the great founder of Protestantism in Germany, he basically said, we human beings are sinful by nature, and we're not capable of attaining the level of perfection that Jesus taught. He said, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, essentially what ended up happening is that the Sermon on the Mount became so high that it became impractical to many Christians. And they said, no, Jesus was he was God himself. That's why he could practice those things. But those teachings are not meant for ordinary people. And I think that's a great shame. And I think part of the reason that Sri Ramakrishna came again, God came again in the form of Sri Ramakrishna, is to tell people, no, you should actually try to the best of your ability to follow Jesus' teachings to the letter. And so Swami Vivekananda, when he visited the West on several occasions in the late 1890s, he was speaking to Christian audiences, and he would tell them in a very startling way. He would say, go back to Christ. You call yourselves Christian, but you're not practicing Christianity. Go back to the person who had nowhere to lay his head. What he meant is that Jesus stood for renunciation of worldliness. And when he went to the West, he saw nothing but material comforts and people chasing after name and fame and luxury and going to church, but only in name, but without the sincerity of heart behind it. So anyway, I just as a way of elaborating your first very nice point. And the second point I really liked, because you pointed to a place in the Bible, in the Old Testament Samuel's, which actually teaches the spiritual power and spiritual value of music. That music itself has the power to rid us of impurities and bring us closer to God. So that's a really wonderful point. Thank you very much.
We would like to invite... Yes.
About the second question, can I add something?
Please.
Swami Vivekananda told that music is the best way of worship, because at that time, usually it is very soothing for the mind, and so the soul of our is getting more concentrated to the God. So music is the best way of worship. So far I remember
Yeah. That may not be an exact quotation, but you're right that he said something like that. But one thing I want to emphasize, it's the beauty of music is that it does not speak to the mind only. it speaks to the heart directly, right? And that's very important. And Bhagavad Gita, there's a line which says, when Bhagavan Krishna is describing how we should meditate, he says, Mano Hridi Nirudhyach. Yeah, we should stop the mind in the heart. We should stop the mind in the heart. And I think part of the reason why music is so powerful is because it helps us to do that spontaneously, without trying. The yogis, they do it consciously, and they try to eliminate all the thoughts from the mind. Chitta vritti nirodha. But with music, that happens spontaneously. By listening to music or singing a song with full concentration and full bhava, the mind automatically goes quiet and the heart opens. And we feel a kind of natural love for God and a natural bhakti. So thank you, Kalpana, that's a nice point. But I want to just emphasize that music does not speak only to the mind, but primarily to the heart. And that's what makes it so powerful.
Next
Pranam, I am a physician and I know that music has a tremendous role in therapy. There is a music therapy. So sometimes due to the music, the patient who is unconscious, not responding, but continuous having usually the classical music, the ragas, that has tremendous effect on the mind. And mind does not exist in the brain, but mind always in the heart. We said that mind is in our brain, but it is not in our brain. It is in our heart. And so whenever Swamiji told that if you have anything to guide yourself, don't go for your brain, but go with your heart.
Yes, thank you very much.
Next question, please. Kindly introduce yourself and please ask the question in brief. Hemant, you have any question? Hemant from Hyderabad. Shirish, do you have any question?
If there is nobody, Nirmal, if you allow me, then I would like to ask one more question.
Then I would ask Maladi if she has. So please go ahead, Hiranya, with your question.
Maharaj, I just wanted to learn out of ignorance that when we read Ramprasad's life or Ramakrishna's life, there is a long discussion on their sadhana and for their struggle for God realizations. Do we have similar description in Jesus' life? Or Jesus' life has no such struggle to realize God?
No, we do. We have the example of the 40 days in the wilderness when he was presented with different temptations. Satan came and tried to tempt him to go away from God. And so there is this kind of, we don't have it in as much detail, but there's a beautiful part in the Bible, in the New Testament, where it explains this. You can look up on Google, 40 days of in the wilderness. And I would say that would be the equivalent of Sri Ramakrishna sadhana period. There was also a period of intense sadhana for Jesus.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Maladi, do you have any question for Maharaji or any observation?
Yeah. Yes, I have a question. Initially, you said that we have to choose one path, right? In this materialized world versus God. Like people like us who are born who are born and who are married, who have children, we are in a midway. Like, of course, we are worshipping God, we are looking for soul realization. But you said only one path, either materialized path or the God. But we cannot get rid of our loved ones. Not, I won't say the word get rid. I mean, we cannot, we have still our hankering for our children, for our lives. We may reduce many material wants, but still it's not either or. We are doing both, and there is the dilemma. What do you tell people like us?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's a very reasonable and practical question that'll come up. So let me clarify what I meant. So when Jesus said you can choose God or mammon but not both, he didn't mean it's a choice between monastic life and a worldly life. It's not about monk versus householder, not like that.
Yeah. My, okay.
Can you turn off your...
Sorry.
I think if you mute the thing, then you can hear. Yeah. So, but it's a choice between, there are two different attitudes toward life, or attitudes in life. One is a worldly attitude, the other is a spiritual attitude. And what Sri Ramakrishna taught to everybody is that even householders can have they can have either a spiritual attitude or a worldly attitude. So to give you an example, actually, in fact, many times in the gospel, Sri Ramakrishna would often be teaching the need to renounce lust and greed. And sometimes the householder devotees became worried and they became disturbed and they said, "Are, you're talking about renunciation, but we have a wife and children. What do we do?" And then he said, "I never told you to become monks. That's not what I'm teaching." Sri Ramakrishna says, but he adds, and this is a very important point he makes. Sri Ramakrishna says, "Ekta duto chile howar pore bhai boner moton thakbe." That's the Bangla, which means after having one or two children, try to live with your spouse like brother and sister. What does he mean by that? What he means is, see, you were saying, Mala, by the way, when you were saying, see, we mix Bhoga and Yoga, we're doing both spirituality and we're leading a worldly life. Not that. That's not what he's saying. He said, be honest with yourself. Ask yourself, where am I now? Where do I stand now? How worldly am I? Right now, I have certain worldly desires. That's why I got married. That's why I had children. I have certain selfish attachments to my own family, to my country, and this and that, 100 things. Be honest with yourself. This is called, the first step is honest self-assessment. Know where you are and be honest with yourself. And these are my limitations. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. But then he says, once you engage in that honest self-assessment, the next step is, how do I bring myself closer to God? And what Sri Ramakrishna taught is that marriage itself is a spiritual path. If you do it, if you take the right attitude toward marriage, if you think of marriage as an opportunity for worldly enjoyment, that is exactly the path of prayer, the path of enjoyment that will take you away from God. But there's another way of thinking of marriage, which is the traditional Hindu way. The traditional Hindu way of thinking of marriage is, this is a dharmic way for you to make gradual progress toward God realization. This is the Hindu way of thinking about marriage. We should not get married and then for the rest of our lives say we are enjoying the world and enjoying our spouse and enjoying our children. This is not the right approach. Marriage is an opportunity for spiritual evolution. And if you are genuine as a spiritual aspirant, as a householder, what you will find is that the way you look upon your spouse will evolve. When you first married your husband, after 10 years of marriage, after 20 years of marriage, after 40, 50 years of marriage, if you are really leading a spiritual life as a householder, the way you look upon your spouse will get transformed. Actually, the way you look upon your children will become transformed. You won't think of them as much with selfish attachment anymore. You'll think of them as God's children, and you'll think of yourself as a servant of God. I'm serving my children as a servant of Thakur, of Sri Ramakrishna, and you'll look upon your spouse as a spiritual partner, and you won't think of them with worldly eyes as much as you did in the past. So this is I think the very profound idea behind Sri Ramakrishna's teaching. Even in your marriage, eventually try to remove the worldliness from your marriage and try to live with your spouse, live with your children in a purely spiritual manner. So I think that would be the way I would answer your question. Thank you for that nice question.
Can you just add one thing?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Now, by separating from my children, I have both the longing, Maharaji. Sometimes I long for my kids, and many times I long for God. Here I'm longing both. Now, I know they are God's children, but sometimes my humanness as a mother prevails. And many a times I tell I'm not my mind, I concentrate on God, but once in a while, like today, is a Christmas time, 2 years back they used to come, they cannot come. I'm longing for them. Here, those weaknesses come. Now, what do I do? As a devotee and as a mother, advise me.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And what I would recommend is speak directly to Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother, whoever you pray to, and say, "Oh Mother, here are my weaknesses. I'm trying to think of you, but instead I'm thinking of my children. tells all Sharadama, she would often say this. She says, whatever sufferings, whatever weaknesses you're feeling, just confess them to God, and you'll feel immediately that this big burden has been lifted from your shoulders. So that's the advice I would give you. And another thing I would mention is another beautiful teaching of Sri Ramakrishna's. He would often distinguish, in Bangla, there are two terms, Maya and Daya. Maya is worldliness. Daya is compassion. And he explained the difference. He said these are two opposite feelings. Maya is selfish attachment for me and mine. I love my children because they're my children. Do I love other people's children the way I love my children? No. Why don't I love them? Because they're my children. And ultimately at the root of that is ego and selfishness. I love my children because they're my children. I love my money because it's my money. I love my husband because he's my husband. I don't love other people's husbands. That's Maya. That's what Sri Ramakrishna called Maya. Daya is the exact opposite. Loving everybody equally because we see God in everybody. God is equally present in everybody, right? So we look upon everybody with equal love because we love God alone and we see God in everybody. Of course, that's a very high ideal. But remember what Sri Ramakrishna said to householders. Think of marriage and think of being in samsara as an opportunity for spiritual growth, for gradual spiritual evolution. Ask yourself, where do I stand now? Okay, right now I have a certain bhakti for God. I also have a bunch of worldly desires and I'm very attached to my children, I'm very attached to my spouse. But where do I want to see myself in 20 years? I want to become less attached to my children and more attached to God. I want to have more devotion for God and devote more of my time to japa and dhyana and to prayer, right? And then try to make the gradual steps in that direction. That's what I would recommend.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharajji, for such a beautiful and enlightened answer. We have the time for last question. Partha, if you are there, if you have anything to ask, you can do. Partha Mitra.
Thank you, Nirmal. Swamiji, just one question on this dilemma of spiritualism and materialism. I think this dilemma probably remains with us throughout our lives. No matter how much do we try to resolve it, I suppose once through experience we are probably able to resolve it. I mean, this is what I feel, but I may be wrong in my assessment. I would like to know your views on it.
So your view is that this is a conflict that remains with us throughout our lives. Is that the thing?
That's right. That's right. Constantly try to resolve it. I mean, the more mature we are, the more easily we'll be able to resolve it. But
that's right. I think that you've answered your own question.
Yeah.
You've answered your own question. I don't think we can make generalizations about all householders should feel this way. There are more and less spiritually evolved householders, as there are more and less spiritually evolved monks. Not all monks are equal. Not all householders are equal. Some householders are like Nag Mahashaya. Sri Ramakrishna was in one sense a householder. He married Sharada Devi. Right? So, I mean, these are ideal householders. Nobody can come close to them, to Sri Ramakrishna or Nag Mahashaya. Right? But there are also different levels of householder. Girish Ghosh was a very highly evolved spiritual householder, but lower level from Nag Mahashaya, we can say. And then there are the rest of us. We're struggling, each in our own way. And the point is, this is something that's mentioned in the Gita, and this is something that Sri Ramakrishna often emphasized. In Gita, the shloka says, Aneka janma samsiddhas tato yati parangatim. Having practiced spiritual sadhanas over the course of many, many lifetimes, we eventually attain spiritual perfection, the spiritual goal of life, which is God realization. Don't think this is a journey of one life. This is a journey of many lives. So in your case, you may feel that, in this life, how much progress have I made? Maybe I have fewer worldly desires, but I still don't feel a real love for God. I don't feel real longing for God. That's okay. Because even Gita says, even if you take a single step toward God, that step will carry over to your next life. Neha vikramana shusti pratyavayana vidate swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even a tiny little bit of effort in the direction of karma will carry over into your next life. So this is one, actually we're talking about Sri Ramakrishna Christianity, Hinduism, Christianity. One important difference between Orthodox Christianity and Hinduism is that Orthodox Christianity believes in one life. It's all or nothing. We have only this life. If we screw up, if we don't realize God in this life, we're done. That's what most Christians seem to say, Orthodox Christians. Hinduism takes a more liberal stand. It says, no, even if you don't realize God, but even so, even if you make a little bit of progress in this life, that progress will carry over into your next life. And it's like a long journey over many, many lives. Eventually, every single human being will attain God realization. If not in this birth, then in a future birth. So we should never despair. We should never lose hope that I'm not good enough, I'm still too early. No, every single one of us will attain God realization. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, some people will be fed at 6 a.m., other people will be fed at 12 p.m., other people at 6 p.m., other people at midnight. But he says, everybody will be fed. In the same way, every single human being will attain God realization. If not in this life, then in a future life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maharajji. Now, I think we have Hemant, you wanted to ask something? So, okay. So, we'll come to the second part of the program, then we'll have vote of thanks, and we are so indebted to Maharajji. So our second part of the program is about 25 to 30 minutes, is about celebration of Merry Christmas, and we will play two Christmas carol, and at the outset we would wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we earnestly pray that our difficulties, our problems will be left behind. At least the sufferings of humanity due to pandemic will be behind in the new year. So we start the program with a beautiful story of Antpur Math, Ramakrishna Mission Math in West Bengal, India, where on 24th of December, on the eve of Christmas, there was prayer by the 9 direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Many people think that this is the start of Ramakrishna Math, the Ramakrishna order. So the heading of this write-up is Ramakrishna Math Antpur, the story of the birth of the Ramakrishna order on December 24, 1886. Because there are questions why Ramakrishna order, Ramakrishna mission and some of its foreign centers celebrate on the eve of Christmas, on 24th December. What is the story behind? The story takes us to 24th December 1886 in a village called Antpur in then Bengal, now West Bengal, India. So this is, and now there's a museum in the name of Dhuni Mandapa in Antpur in West Bengal. This pavilion was built in 1981, small but beautiful. This reminisces the inspiration that Swamiji and his fellow disciples received and the holy vow of sannyasa that took. On its walls adorned the sculptures of Thakur's 9 disciples who were present at Antpur on 24 December 1886. Besides the sculptures, 49 terracotta pieces depicting Thakur's life add to the beauty and poignance of the structure. The 9 disciples present on 24th December 1886 at Antpur are as follows: Sri Narendranath Datta, Swami Vivekananda himself; Sri Baburam Ghosh, Swami Premananda; Sri Sarat Chandra Chakravarti, Swami Sardananda; Sri Sasi Bhushan Chakravarti, Swami Ramakrishna, Sri Taraknath Ghoshal, Swami Shivananda. 6. Sri Kali Prasad Chandra, Swami Abhedananda. 7. Sri Nitya Niranjan Ghosh, Swami Niranjanananda. 8. Sri Gangadhar Gangopadhyay, Swami Akhandananda. 9. Sri Sharda Charan Mitra, Swami Trigunatitananda. At the Kashipur Garden House, Thakur, who was gravely ill, grouped together the 12 young men who dedicated their lives for Thakur, and the responsibility of running the group, the Sangha, fell on Narendranath. But after the passing away of Thakur on 16th August 1886, the at Kashipur, which was taken on rent, was released in August 1886 itself. The group was disbanded and many went back home. Tarak, Kali, Sashi, and Burogopal started to live in the dilapidated house taken on rent in Baranagar. Narendranath was the anxious and lost for a direction in reorganizing the group. At that time, Matangani Devi sent her eldest daughter Tulsi Ram to Calcutta, now known as Kolkata, to extend an invitation to go to Nagpur at the end of December. Narendranath considered the invitation to be an instruction from Thakur and gleefully decided to go to Nagpur. At first, it was said that only a few like Narendranath, Baburam, etc. will go, but word spread around and a big group became comprising Narendra, Baburam, Sarat, Shashi, Tarak, Kali, Niranjan, Gangadhar, and Sarada Charan. They boarded the train to Tarakeshwar at Howrah and took along with them the percussion instrument tabla and a string instrument tanpura. Getting inside the compartment, the group started singing the song Shiva Sankara Vyoma Vyoma Bhola. They spent the journey with music and made merry all the time. They got to Haripal station and reached Nagpur 8 miles away by hackney carriages, horse-drawn carts. It was then about evening. Baburam's mother was overjoyed to receive them, treated them as her sons, and made proper arrangements for their food and stay. There was no dearth of men to serve young men, but Matangini took it upon herself to look after them. In the green quietude of the village, the young men, having no thought for food and stay, gave their entire concentration to prayer and meditation. Their constant topic of discussion was around Ramakrishna's love, instructions, ideal, life, and the responsibility with which he entrusted them. Along with the discussion, they were occupied with the chanting of hymns, singing devotional songs, and prayers. In this ecstatic existence, the young men gradually got into one consciousness. Narendranath led them. At this time, an unthinkable happening came before them on 24th December. That is the most interesting part of the story. Long after the evening, they sat under the open, bright and starlit sky and lit a fire, concentrating on meditation. After the meditation, they were discussing God when Narendranath had a rare inspiration and started talking about the life of Jesus, his penance, his sacrifice. His words were so eloquent and so full of humility that everyone was very deeply moved. He then talked about Saint Paul and other disciples of Jesus whose hard labor and sacrifice made it possible for Christianity as a religion and the Christians as the religious group to come up and prosper. He exhorted his fellow disciples to shape themselves as the Christian saints and called upon them to sacrifice their lives for the welfare of mankind. Narendra fellow disciples were charged by his oration. They stood up and touched the fully lit fire and took the solemn oath of renouncing this world. The fire in front of them reflected upon their faces and made their emotion charged oath even brighter. The whole atmosphere, as it were, trembled by divine inspiration and lapped up by this heavenly sight. When their minds came down to earth again, they were astonished to know that the night was the Christmas Eve. Later, recalling the importance of the Ankhpur incident, Swami Shivananda said, "It was at Ankhpur that our resolve to become a group grew more intense. Thakur had already made us sannyasis. That was cemented at Ankhpur. After spending a week at Ankhpur, they came back to Calcutta. In 1887, Rakhal and Budo Gopal came with Narendranath to Ankhpur. These 11 embraced sannyasa formally by performing Biraja Home at Baranagar Mutt in January 1887. Thus, the Ramakrishna monastic order was born, and with the passage of time is now a household word. This really gives very beautifully how Christmas Eve started to get celebrated in the Ramakrishna order. Now, to give a feel of a Christmas Day, we would play two Christmas carol. Please wait for those two Christmas carol. I hope you will enjoy, and you also can pray to Christ while listening to the Christmas carol. Please give me 30 seconds.
Only town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Above thy deep and dreamless sleep, the silent stars go by. Yet in thy dark street shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. For Christ is born of Mary, and gathered all about. While mortals sleep, the angels keep their watch of wondering love.
Oh, morning stars together proclaim thy holy birth, and praises sing to God the King, and peace to men on earth.
The second song. There is some problem with the second song. Now we would thank you very much, Swami Medhanandaji, for kindly giving us such an important discourse, and we really look for your continued support and look forward to your next lecture. So thank you, Maharajji, and thank you for your guidance, and thank you for your continued blessings and cooperation. Now I would request our Hiranya Mukhopadhyay to kindly give vote of thanks. Hiranya Mukhopadhyay.
Maharaj Pranam, and what else I could say? Thank you on behalf of all the devotees from Manila, from elsewhere, from India, from anywhere in the world. Our heartfelt thanks for these wonderful lectures. Every time you speak, I go back with a lot of questions and issues, but time is limited. I'll get an opportunity to clarify some of my questions. Thank you again, Maharaj, for a wonderful lecture. Wonderful evening.
Thank you very much. And again, I just wanted to mention one thing again, that the songs today, if you liked the ideas behind the songs, please go to the YouTube links and listen to the songs yourselves, because the audio quality was quite poor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all the participants who have been who have attended and spared their time and made the program successful. Please, tomorrow again we are celebrating the Tithi Puja of Holy Mother. So 3:00 p.m. India time, 5:30 p.m. Philippines, Singapore, Hong Kong time. So if you can make it, Swami Pitambaranandaji will discuss with you the real nature of Holy Mother. And thank you once again, Medhanandaji Maharaj. We are immensely and enormously grateful to you for your time and for your very useful instructions and inspiration. Thank you, Maharaji. We end the program here.
Pranam Maharaji.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
Namaste
Christmas.
to all of you. Jai Ma. Tomorrow is happy.
Joy Ma. Okay.
Advance Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Anik Pranam,
Jai Ramakrishna, Jai Ramakrishna.
Maharaji, and he will answer. Yes, he has answered my question. Though sometimes I go up, I fall away straight up and down, up and down, up and down. Yes.
All of your worries, all of your weaknesses, just confess them to God. That's the best thing you can do.
Okay.
And she'll take care of you. Jai Ramakrishna. Jai Ramakrishna.
I end the recording here. I end the recording.
So Maharaj, my son is also brahmachari.
Oh. What's his name?
Wait, now he is sannyasa is in Thakur City.
Oh, I know Vid. Yes. Oh, that's very nice to meet you. Jai Ramakrishna.
Can I say something? Sarvapriyananda is my cousin brother.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Bhubaneswar, Cuttack. Yes, my mama body, my mother's
Oh,
side.
wow.
Yes.
ठीक है सर, जय राम कृष्ण।